Welcome to the 19th season of the Nitwits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Nittany Lions and the only show of its kind in the state. Our Nitwits panel features Neil Riddell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of FightOnState.com. Between them, they've covered Penn State for 70 years. The Nitwits are hosted by WTAJ Sports Director Alex Colley, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Solani provide orthodontics for children and adults. By W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
Hello and welcome into our post-Keystone Classic edition of the Nitwits alongside the stellar crew of Mark Brennan, Neil Riddell, and Mike Irwin. I'm Jamie Baker. The first Pitt-Penn State matchup in 16 years is in the book. It was a 42-39 Penn State loss. This was the highest scoring Penn State-Pitt matchup of all time, the entire series. So obviously defense was not at the forefront of this one. What'd you guys think about that defense?
Well, I think Penn State's offense is going to have to carry their defense for a while, with all the injuries and the inexperience. I mean, if you want to grasp at some straws, the defense I thought played better in the fourth quarter and got the offense the ball back a couple times. They forced a turnover and forced a couple punts, but they got to start better, that's for sure.
Yeah, the one thing where the sanctions really hit was with big players. They were fortunate that when the sanctions hit, they already had some pretty good defensive linemen in there, the Austin Johnsons, the Zettles, and as it turns out, Nassib. Well, those three guys all go, along with Terrell Barney. I mean, that guy made it to the final cut of the Jets. So you lost four good defensive linemen. I thought the defensive line was going to struggle, but not the way it did. Pitt completely dominated up front. I was really surprised by that. Give Pitt a lot of credit for knowing what Penn State's weakness was going to be and exploiting it with an outstanding running game. They really didn't have to pass until they got to the red zone.
Well, Pitt had a very experienced team out there. I mean, a lot of guys back, a lot of seniors. And I think, like Mark's saying, Penn State's defensive line are all pretty much rookies out there. And I think it was a learning experience for them. I think going forward, they finally made some adjustments at halftime and played a lot better the second half. They held Pitt a couple times in the second half. But I go back, I mean, I don't think the defensive line getting a lot of penetration right now. I mean, I don't know they can teach that too much. I go back to when Mike Reed, the old guy from Altoona that was a big winner down there, All-American a couple years. But his whole focus was penetrating into that backfield and getting off the ball quickly. And I think Penn State's going to learn that, these young defensive linemen, but I think it's going to take a while.
Yeah, Gibbons actually has given him some penetration. Now he's a young player who's had some injuries. He took a tough hit yesterday. I was actually more disappointed in the secondary and the linebacking play. These guys are and these guys are experienced players. Now, the linebackers had some injuries with Kabinda, but the secondary in particular missed a lot of tackles and were out of position. They're over-pursuing, I think.
They have to wrap. I mean, the secondary is playing really well in pass defense. I really wonder at this point, we've seen it for a couple years now where there have been tackling issues under James Franklin teams, and it's gone across a couple coordinators. I really wonder if they don't have to focus more on live hitting in preseason ball. I mean, maybe not in the spring, and I know the risk is that You're still young. You don't want to risk hurting your older guys. But at some point, you have to be able to balance that out where, especially early in the season, you're coming out and tackling well. Because clearly, the last couple of years, early in the season, they've had tackling issues. And Mike, you would know as a former player, if you're not doing a lot of hitting, and back in your day, you did a lot of hitting, but if you're not doing a lot of hitting.
Well, the thing that I look at and think about is containing on the corners. I mean, Pitt was running a lot of jet sweeps and some things with that Henderson going in motion one way and then coming back. But the defensive backs aren't coming up quick enough to turn things in, and the defensive end, they get caught inside too much. So they don't really have good outside containment. I think that's the other area that Pitt really hurt us on with that motion and Henderson coming back on those jet sweeps. And it's hard because they ran the shovel passes and did a lot of different things out there. And I think, a young defensive line has to make these adjustments. But I don't think those kids ever saw this before. So
well, I think people are critical of Franklin sometimes as just being, used car salesman, whatever you want to say. After games, he could be pretty candid, and I thought he was. He said they were not prepared for a lot of the things that Pitt did. That's a pretty stunning admission. I know it's early in the season. I know Pitt has a new coordinator, but he said they basically were not ready for a lot of that jet sweep and some of the stuff that Pitt was doing.
You're right. He called out subtly his staff. Because there was some confusion on whether the defense was going to be allowed to clap and disrupt their offensive cadence, but it turned out, and that was the Big Ten crew, turned out that they were able to do that, so they weren't really quite prepared for that. And we'll get to the fatal interception at the end. He was disappointed with some of the personnel grouping, and that, he was critical.
Do you think some of that is with Trace McSorley? I mean, obviously, they're used to big crowds, but that was a different kind of crowd than I think Penn State is used to seeing. Do you think that kind of threw off McSorley? I mean, he was good at times, he was bad at times. Do you think that was part of it?
Well, I think the clap cadence is a different deal. They, as a team, were not ready for Pitt clapping at the same time that McSorley was. I mean, you could see on the fumble or whatever it was that McSorley didn't know the ball was coming, and I assume Gaia heard a clap. So to me, that's something that's more on the coaching staff, that if that's the rule, and I'm still not clear, as we tape this, I'm still not clear what that rule is. I'm hoping we get some definitive, answers on what you're allowed to do and not do there. But sure, Jamie, later in the game, Trace McSorley once again made some phenomenal plays, but he's also making mistakes. But I'm not saying I'm okay with that, but as a young quarterback, that's kind of to be expected.
It's pretty hard to criticize the offense. I mean, they put 39 points on the board and had over 400 yards in offense. I mean, if anything, I think McSorley played well outside of like those two turnovers, but it wasn't his fault. He got nailed a couple times and lost the ball. And unfortunately for Penn State, it happened early and gave Pitt that big lead. But I mean, we were moving the ball. Even on the first series, we moved the ball pretty well. And then finally, I think they had that bad snap, and we went way back.
Some of this is a line issue still. I think the kid's really a warrior, played with tremendous heart in this game, made some great throws. He's also put the ball on the ground now 5 times in 2 games, and they've fumbled too many times. So now that's something that has to be corrected. They're running that read option, and the teams are jumping it and causing fumbles with one of their signature plays.
But going back to what Mike said, anybody here, anybody in the world expect Penn State to score 39 points in that game?
No.
Nobody did. I mean, and that's so if there's a silver lining, it's that, and that they scored 39 in spite of the mistakes. I mean, what might they have done without the turnovers? Now, I know you can't just say that, but I do think as difficult as that game was for some folks, the fact that they came back, there were some things, especially offensively, that I think kind of opened my eyes and like, wow.
They were definitely in position to win that game. I mean, Haley makes that catch, he might go in for a score, or Hamilton.
Yeah, that was really a tough drop. I felt bad for that kid.
I felt bad for me.
He's been a really great player. Yeah, that's right, it cost you. You and then him.
And that
boy, but you know what? That's such a big drop in that situation. Yeah. You live for a moment like that. And that kid has caught well over 100 balls in his career.
And he had he had a great game yesterday on Saturday.
I felt bad for him.
Well, we're going to talk about him in a few minutes, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at some of the strengths and weaknesses we've seen out of this Penn State football team so far. Don't go away.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need.
Hi, this is former Nittany Lion Brandon Noble, and you're watching the Nitwits.
Welcome back. Neil, you tweeted this yesterday, and I thought it was a great stat. This team has gotten off to very slow starts on the road. They've been outscored 119-54 in first halves of their last 6 road games. So what is the deal with this slow start for this team?
It has to be addressed. I mean, this is something that has been a pattern now. They're playing good teams on the road. They're adjusting at halftime. They're showing a lot of heart, but it doesn't speak well to their scheming. Mark, I think you made a really good point about their tackling early in games. Now, some of that was carried over from O'Brien and a reaction to the sanctions. They did that thud drill, and because they're so afraid to lose players that, I think that might be part of it. But I think they're getting out schemed before the game starts.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not convinced Neil's doing his own tweeting.
That one was a
This guy's not even on Facebook, so I don't. The only reporter in the world who's not on Facebook. But yeah, it's one of those things where they have to come out, and you can't afford to get in these kind of holes against these kind of teams. Now, where I give them credit is, the last couple of years they get in that sort of hole and they were just completely folding, El Foldo. This time they came back. That's something that you could build on. I'm not saying it's okay, Penn State fans. You don't want to, get in these holes, but to at least show the moxie to come back, I thought was a positive.
But it's not something you can plan to do. I mean, I look at it, they moved the ball well the first time they had the ball outside that bad snap, and then losing those 2 turnovers where, again, he got pressure from the outside. Now, that was an offensive line mistake. I'm sure having them ready, I think they were ready. I mean, we saw the offense later on. I mean, going back to, in the beginning when we had real problems with the defensive line combination, that was the big thing that hurt us in the beginning of that game. And then we did make adjustments later on. But I don't think it's a slow start, just the way things have happened out there for them, losing the ball and a couple fumbles and that type of thing. I'm not sure they're not.
Well, the bottom line is the score, isn't
they're
it?
not preparing to be down 28.
No, they're starting slow.
But
they're
it is happening.
They're being doubled in their score in the first half when they go on the road.
Well, but why would they double their score in the first half is my point.
Okay.
Because of these fumbles and the mistakes. But
right, yeah, they're not
that's the
playing
outside line. I mean, you're going to tell the line you got to block better. You don't think they already know that?
You got to play with the
game?
urgency in the first quarter that you're playing with in the second half.
But they already know they're going into the game. They know they're trying to block the guy.
You know
the
what?
guy
I
gets
think
around
this game was bigger to Pitt, and they were more fired up early. Penn State didn't match that adrenaline level.
That's
Penn
absolutely
State,
true, yeah.
Penn State had them at the 1. And they jammed the ball. Pitt jammed the ball.
Oh, I
right down
agree.
the
I mean,
throat.
I watched the game too. I mean,
because they were telling us all week this
Pitt deserves a lot of credit.
Penn State's still not sure it's a rivalry.
Mike usually doesn't watch the game, but he did.
But let me tell you,
I'm kidding.
I mean, no, I know you are. But I mean, offensively, I think Nardozzi and his crew did a great job.
They did.
I mean, mixing up their plays and doing some things. Penn State wasn't ready for that. I mean, they were definitely outcoached in the beginning of that game.
But when are we going to say, Mike, Penn State completely bamboozled a good team early in the game? You know what I'm saying? When are we going to see the flip of that? And that's what I think is the key. That Penn State has to come out and not only play even, but let's once in a while see them be the ones that are giving other people trouble with their adjustments. We talk all about this new offense, all about this new offense. Hey, Penn State had a new offense, new offensive coordinator, was vanilla in the first game. How come their offense wasn't working so great early?
Well, the only thing is we've only played 2 games. I mean, and maybe
How many
we had
did
a
Pitt
slow
play?
start. Pitt has played the same number.
Right.
I mean, and they started out better. I mean, no question about it. We were all witnessing that.
The special teams, I think, have made marked improvement. But just when you had a handle, there was another leak in the operation, and that might be a personnel thing that they have to look at. And, James Franklin is complaining now for about 2 years on the positioning of the kickoffs. And I know Julius is a good kid and a novelty factor in a way, and kicking into that area at Pitt Stadium with the wind is a little more difficult, but they got to fix that too.
He struggled with consistency last year. Comes out this year, they allow him to focus on one thing, kickoffs. Doesn't have to worry about placements, and it's great when you're booming them through the end zone against Kent State. The tough part is when you are asked to do one thing against Pitt, and when the game is on the line and you struggle with that, You just can't have that. Having said all of that, the improvement of their special teams overall is unbelievable.
Absolutely.
I mean, Tyler Davis, that's been overlooked. Gillikin, unbelievable. Reed, now all of a sudden you have a legit punt returner, probably the first one
Plus
since
he's
Mike
playing
was
well
there.
on defense, too.
Yeah, I even thought the kickoff return guys, while not great, they look a little bit better. So across the board, good, but you can't have things falling apart in a clutch.
But Julius in defensive end, he kicked a lot of them through the end zone in the beginning. Then and the first one that Henderson ran back, he only got back to about the 12 or 15-yard line, I think, maybe after. But then he ran the big one.
But
back.
Neil explained,
you were down
Jamie
on the
explained.
field. Isn't that the windy area?
That closed end there were times right before you're hitting record on a play that you're literally almost getting knocked over. So there was
Yesterday, of course,
a lot of
yesterday
wind
wasn't-
yesterday.
was
There
there?
was definitely a lot of wind
Yeah, but Neil,
yesterday.
explain what Franklin said after the game. They want to kick it.
They want to kick it to a certain area, and they didn't, and then that exposed their coverage, is what he said.
So win, no win, whatever, you have to kick it to that area. And I know that you have to do it when the game's on the line, and when you don't, that's what happens.
I agree. Okay, so time for a quick break, but when we get back, we're going to take one last look at the Keystone Classic and see if we have decided if this is actually a rivalry. Don't go away.
The Nitwits are brought to you by the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Selaney Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Selaney provide orthodontics for children and adults.
We now return to the Nitwits. A roundtable discussion of Penn State football.
Welcome back. It was quite a scene at Heinz Field yesterday, the biggest crowd ever at a City of Pittsburgh sporting event. So what did you guys think of this experience, and is it actually a rivalry again?
This has always been a rivalry, even when they haven't been playing, and so many people, former players, broadcasters, everybody thinks this game should be played. I think it's the best rivalry in the country that hasn't been played every single year, and I really think both schools ought to get together and announce that they're going to extend it annually as soon as possible.
I'll play devil's advocate. Watching ESPN Game Day Final, this game was on ESPN, did not come on till the bottom of the hour. They showed about 2 minutes worth of stuff. So as I've said over and over again, this is great between Altoona and Pittsburgh, but you get much west of that or much east of that. People like the rivalry, but they're not as invested in it as folks in this area are.
I thought it was great atmosphere. Going down the Heinz Field, and everywhere you looked, it was either a Penn State or a Pitt shirt. I think it was about 50-50, Pitt, Penn State. I agree with Mark. It's mostly the Western Pennsylvania people, probably from Altoona and west, that really look at this rivalry, because I know we were tailgating with a bunch of Pitt guys. And I think it's good, but I don't think Penn State will continue it because they have these obligations to the Big Ten. So it's unfortunate in a way. I'd rather, and even then, if they played at the end of the year, when our kids had some more experience, it might have been a different result.
They're not going to do that.
No,
I've
they can't
accepted
do
that, but I think
who are you going to take off the schedule?
honor of
I'll ask you the
history.
same question that I asked last week. Who
Kent
are you
State,
going to
take off the MAC. Western Pennsylvania has been pretty important to the history of Penn State football. The biggest crowd in the history of Pittsburgh. That says something.
Which is
Steelers play over there, too.
still 40,000 less than you would get in Beaver Stadium for Kent State.
Well, for Coastal Carolina.
But Pitt doesn't have a facility to hold any more than that 69,000.
Yeah.
That's the biggest facility they have. And the biggest crowd ever, 17 people short of 70,000 is what it was.
That's not too shabby. All right, so we've looked at the Keystone Classic plenty, but when we get back, we're going to head to the future and take a look at what Penn State has to do if they want to beat Temple. Don't go away.
The Nitwits are brought to you by W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
Okay, so 1-1 heading into week 3, and it's another rival in Temple. I'm sure that every Penn State fan remembers what happened last year. Christian Hackenberg was sacked 10 times, and Penn State's first loss to Temple since 1941. So, after this loss to Pitt, and after what happened last year, how important is winning this game this year?
Well, this is a must-win. I mean, we're at that point. They can't afford to lose to Temple after you've lost to them last year and you're coming off a loss to Pitt. And one of your slogans has been, whether it's for recruiting or not, has been dominate the state. So hey, I think Temple's kind of in a tough spot in that regard this week.
Yeah, I've said over and over, I don't think James Franklin's job is remotely on the line this year. I think next year is going to be the year that people are going to be taking a hard look at things. But in context of this season, this is a must-win, because if you don't get this, then you're heading out to Michigan, and we all see how well Michigan's playing, and then you're in the heart of the Big Ten schedule, and things could go south in a hurry. So yeah, this is absolutely a big game for Penn State, and in the context of this season, it is a must-win as far as I'm concerned.
You know, just to follow up on one thing that Mark said, I was kind of surprised that Franklin's job would even be considered on. I mean, I think he's done a great job this year so far. I mean, they came back yesterday. Unfortunately, they lost the game, but I think as far as recruiting and coaching, they've improved their special teams, they've improved their offense. Well, their defense is a little questionable yet, but I think it will be coming later on. But back to Temple, the other big thing that's going on this weekend is our class is having our 50th anniversary down there.
Okay.
And we're going to celebrate after the game down there. I mean, we have about 30 lettermen coming back for that, and we're going to meet afterwards and
Huge
talk about how
congrats
good
on
we were.
that is so
Yeah,
cool.
that's
We talk about how good you were every week, Mike.
I never really get onto the soapbox much there, though. But I don't really think. I mean, I think it is a must-win, and I think Penn State will be up to the challenge. I really think we'll go out and continue our dynasty.
So,
just to
one
be
quick
clear,
thing though, Mike was 12 years old when he played, right? Is that what you're telling us?
Right, yeah. You know, just to be clear, none of us have said, and I think the mainstream media has not said that James Franklin is or should be on
Some
the hot
national folks have. Some national folks have, and a lot of fans have. But I think it's important to put that out there, because I just don't think it's the case this year. I mean, I've said it over and over. When you're as young as they still are, with 66% of your scholarship players, freshman and sophomore eligibility, they are still in the process of getting back to where they need to be. But Neil, as you said, I mean, if you want to say that you're dominating the state, and whether Franklin thinks that was taken the wrong way or not, when you say Penn State's going to dominate the state, you better work at dominating the state, not just recruiting wise, but on the field as well. And to lose to Temple and Pitt would be tough.
All right, so that brings us to our predictions. Neil, you won last week. I know you're very happy about that, so you get to make the first prediction of this week.
Thank you, Jamie. I think Temple, this could be a letdown week with the emotion of Penn State, but I don't think so. I think this is an angry football team right now. And Temple, having beaten Penn State last year, I think is in the wrong spot. They already lost to Army. I'm going to say Penn State 43, Temple 24.
All right, Mike, real quick, give me a
Look, I
score.
want to say Penn State 35, Temple 10.
31-24, and Neil, you would get none of this if I didn't help you turn your computer on. You didn't know how to do that. Sorry.
All right,
You're my tech man.
I'm going Penn State 24-13. That about does it for us. We'll see you back here same time, same place next week after the Temple game.
The Nitwits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Solani provide orthodontics for children and adults. By W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.